All right, so welcome to the deep dive. We're going to take a big stack of information today and try to figure out what's important for you.
Sounds good to me.
Today's focus is how proposed tariffs might shake things up in the tech world.
Okay.
Our main source for this is Bloomberg Technology. So to jump right in, former President Trump has suggested new import taxes
Oh, wow.
on autos, chips, and pharmaceuticals.
Okay.
And get this, he's thinking about April 2nd as the start date.
That's really interesting because it's not just about these new tariffs. It's about how these new tariffs will stack on top of the existing ones from the Trump administration.
Right.
It just creates this really kind of complicated, layered impact on the markets.
Oh, I see.
Yeah.
So it's like a double whammy.
Exactly.
Okay, so the markets have already started to react.
Yeah.
European auto stocks are taking a hit,
Oh, I bet.
but Tesla actually got a boost.
Hmm.
Do you think that's just a coincidence?
No, not at all. While the tariffs might hurt Tesla's European competitors, giving Tesla a competitive advantage, there's more to it than that. Tesla's really been pushing into lower cost models, which might be less sensitive to price increases caused by tariffs.
Okay.
And of course, we can't forget about the history between Elon Musk and the former president.
Right. Okay, so it sounds like we have to look beyond the surface to really understand what these market moves mean.
Yeah, I think so.
It's not as straightforward as it might seem at first glance.
Yeah.
Speaking of reading between the lines, there seems to be a disconnect between how the market is interpreting these tariffs and what the former president's goals are.
Right.
What do you make of that?
Well, Marta Norton, who's the chief investment strategist over at Power, she suggested that the market might just be viewing these tariffs as a negotiating tactic, something temporary. But if we look back at the former president's history, he has consistently framed tariffs as a source of federal revenue, a way to address trade deficits, and a tool to boost U.S. manufacturing. So it doesn't seem like a temporary thing to him.
So are you saying that we should be cautious about assuming these tariffs are just a blip on the radar?
Yeah, I think so. It really raises a question for our listeners. Does this potential for longer-term tariffs change how they interpret market fluctuations and how they make investment decisions?
That's something to think about for sure. Okay, now for a story that sounds like something out of a sci-fi movie. Microsoft just revealed their first quantum computing chip, Majorana 1.
Yeah, this is a huge development.
Hmm.
Quantum computing could revolutionize industries from medicine to materials science.
Wow.
Jason Zander, who is Microsoft's VP of Strategic Missions, he actually said that quantum computing is about moving beyond approximation to speaking the language of nature.
That sounds really poetic, but what does it actually mean? Like, how is this different from the computers we use every day?
Well, think of it this way. Our everyday computers use bits, which can be either a 0 or a 1. But quantum computers use qubits, which can be a 0 and a 1 at the same time. This lets them handle incredibly complex calculations, especially in fields like chemistry and AI, which are just way too much for regular computers to deal with.
So does this mean that the quantum computing revolution is here?
Well, not quite yet. While there is a lot of excitement and potential around this technology, widespread use of quantum computing is probably still years away, but the race is definitely on, with tech giants like Google and IBM also investing heavily in this space.
Where does Microsoft fit into all of this qubit race?
Well, what's really interesting is that Microsoft is doing something different. They're building both the hardware and the software for their quantum computer. This kind of full-stack approach could give them a big advantage down the road.
It's like you're building the entire ecosystem.
Exactly.
That's really interesting from a strategic perspective. Speaking of strategic moves, Apple just launched the iPhone 16e. It's a more affordable model, priced at $599.
Interesting.
What do you think about that?
I think this launch is strategically aimed at capturing markets in China, India, and Southeast Asia, places with growing economies and a need for affordable smartphones.
Yeah, that makes sense. So even though it's a lower cost model, the 16e still has some pretty impressive specs, like a 6.1-inch screen face ID, USB-C fast charging, and it runs on the same A18 chip as the higher-end models.
Which means that even people who buy the cheaper 16e will still be able to use the fancy new AI features that Apple's working on, including their answer to generative AI like ChatGPT.
So this could really shake up the smartphone market, making advanced features accessible to way more people.
Yeah, definitely.
All right, let's switch gears again and talk about crypto. Bitcoin's been on a bit of a roller coaster ride lately. There's a lot of hope that the new administration might be more crypto-friendly.
Yeah, we're definitely seeing mixed opinions on this. Richard Teng, the CEO of Binance, he believes that the U.S. has a chance to become a leader in the crypto world again. But Kristen Smith, the CEO of the Blockchain Association, she's urging people to be patient because Congress still has to figure out the whole legislative process.
So it sounds like the main takeaway is that there's this delicate balance between encouraging innovation and protecting consumers in this new and evolving regulatory landscape.
Exactly. And we also need to consider the perspective of some of the skeptics out there like Jamie Dimon, who's been pretty vocal about his concerns about cryptocurrencies. How do you think this kind of skepticism from big players could impact mainstream adoption of crypto?
That's a really good question. Speaking of navigating choppy waters,
Yeah.
let's talk about Turo, the car-sharing company that just decided to put their IPO on hold because the market's not looking so good right now.
Right.
We talked about how their business is actually doing pretty well, but I'm curious to hear what you think about the bigger challenges that companies are facing when they're thinking about going public in this kind of market.
Well, Turo's decision to stay private for now shows that sometimes it's better to be patient. Instead of rushing into a public offering just because everyone else is doing it, they're taking their time to make smart long-term investments, solidify their position in the market, and prioritize things like customer trust and safety.
Like how they handled those incidents with their cars earlier this year.
Exactly.
They could have easily just gotten defensive, but they actually stepped up and took responsibility for the safety concerns.
Yeah.
That says a lot about their commitment to doing things the right way.
I think that's a great lesson for any business, really.
Yeah.
Putting the customer first should always be the top priority.
Right.
And it's super important for building a successful business over the long term.
All right, to wrap things up for part one, let's talk about Neuralink. You know that brain-computer interface company co-founded by Elon Musk's ex-partner?
Right.
They're currently trying to raise money at a valuation of $44 billion.
Wow.
It's pretty amazing. What's really interesting is that that's the same price Musk paid for Twitter.
Yeah. And a lot of people were skeptical about that acquisition.
Exactly. This whole thing really shows just how unpredictable the tech industry can be and how something that sounds totally crazy today could be a multi-billion-dollar business tomorrow.
I think this funding could really help Neuralink reach their ambitious goals of developing brain-computer interfaces. Just imagine controlling a prosthetic limb with your thoughts or talking to a computer using just your brain waves.
It makes you wonder what the future holds, right?
It does. Welcome back to the Deep Dive. In part one, we talked about how political stuff like tariffs can really shake things up in the tech world, and we even touched on some pretty futuristic stuff like quantum computing and brain-computer interfaces.
Yeah, there's definitely a lot to think about. It's not just about what's happening, but why it matters to us, you know? So let's go back to those tariffs for a minute and talk about what they could mean for the U.S. tech industry. We know European car makers are bracing for impact, but what about American tech companies?
Well, we can't forget about those chips. They're in pretty much everything tech-related these days, from our phones to those massive data centers.
And if those chips get more expensive because of tariffs, that's going to hurt a lot of tech companies, right?
Exactly. And it's not even just about the higher cost of imported chips. It could really mess up supply chains. If companies can't get the parts they need, it could stifle innovation, and we could even see product shortages.
That's a little worrying, especially since the tech industry relies so much on suppliers all over the world.
Investors are definitely keeping an eye on this. We're already seeing some ups and downs in tech stocks as everyone tries to figure out what the fallout from these tariffs is going to be.
So what does this mean for our listeners? What should they be paying attention to?
Well, if you're invested in tech companies, I'd say look for the ones that have diverse supply chains and the ones that are actively trying to reduce the impact of tariffs. And, as always, having a diversified portfolio is a good way to protect yourself from any market storms.
Good advice. Okay, let's move on to something that could really change things. Quantum computing.
Yeah.
We talked about Microsoft jumping into the qubit race in part one, but I really want to understand what this technology could actually do in the real world.
Beyond all the technical stuff, the real power of quantum computing is its potential to solve some of the biggest problems we face. Imagine developing drugs and treatments that could cure diseases that are incurable right now.
Or even creating materials that are lighter, stronger, and more sustainable. That would be a game changer for so many industries, from construction to transportation.
And even tackling climate change could be within reach. Quantum computing might be the key to discovering more efficient and sustainable energy sources.
It's pretty mind-blowing to think about all the possibilities. It really feels like we're on the brink of a whole new era of scientific discovery and technological advancement.
We're definitely still in the early stages, but the progress that's being made is super exciting. Microsoft's quantum computing chip is a huge step forward, but like with any powerful technology, we need to think about both its potential and its limitations.
That's true. Are there any concerns or potential downsides to quantum computing that we should be aware of?
One big concern is security. Quantum computers could potentially break the encryption that protects our online data. Cybersecurity experts are working hard to figure out how to deal with that. Another concern is the potential for quantum computing to make existing inequalities even worse.
What do you mean by that? How could something like this increase inequality?
Well, if only a few powerful corporations or countries have access to quantum computing, it could create a new kind of digital divide, leaving those without access at a disadvantage.
So it's really important to make sure that everyone has access to this technology and that it's used responsibly.
Absolutely. If we want everyone to benefit from quantum computing, governments, industry leaders, and researchers need to work together and plan carefully.
Okay, let's bring it back down to earth for a minute and talk about smartphones. Apple just released the iPhone 16e, a more affordable model, and I think it was a pretty smart move. But what does this tell us about the future of AI?
Well, the most important thing about the 16e isn't the price. It's the fact that even this cheaper model can run Apple's most advanced AI features. This tells us that sophisticated AI is becoming more and more common and accessible.
That's a huge shift. Imagine a world where almost everyone has a personal AI assistant that can help them with everyday stuff like scheduling appointments or even writing emails.
And it goes beyond personal assistants, too. Think about AI-powered tools for creative things, like making art, composing music, or even writing code. There are so many possibilities, and they're becoming a reality faster than we think.
It's exciting to think about how AI is going to continue to shape our world. But we can't ignore the potential downsides either, like
Right.
people losing their jobs because of automation and the risk of AI being used to spread misinformation.
You're right. We need to have open and honest conversations about how to reduce these risks. It's about finding the right balance between using AI for good and making sure we're prepared for the potential problems it could create.
It's all about responsible innovation, not just innovation for the sake of it. Okay, let's go back to crypto for a minute. We talked about the hope for more crypto-friendly regulations, but what are your thoughts on the current state of crypto regulation in the U.S.?
Well, the government moves slowly, and there's still a lot of uncertainty about the future of crypto in the U.S. Some industry leaders are saying we need to be patient, while others are pushing for clearer rules from regulators.
So there's a mix of optimism, caution, and even some skepticism. How do you think this uncertainty affects the average person who might be thinking about investing in crypto for the first time?
It's important to remember that cryptocurrencies are still pretty new. There's definitely potential, but there's also risk. You really need to do your research, understand the risks, and make sure any investment you make aligns with your financial goals and how much risk you're comfortable with. And don't forget, the crypto market is known for being volatile, so be prepared for some ups and downs.
So it's not just about jumping on the bandwagon because everyone else is doing it.
Exactly. Crypto investments should be a well-thought-out decision, not an impulsive one.
Good point. Okay, let's circle back to Turo, that car-sharing company that decided to hold off on their IPO because of the market. We talked about how their business is actually doing quite well, but I'm interested to hear your thoughts on the bigger challenges facing companies that are thinking about going public in the current market.
Turo's decision to stay private for now is a good example of how sometimes being patient is the best strategy. Instead of rushing to go public, they're using this time to make strategic investments, strengthen their position, and focus on customer trust and safety.
Like how they responded to those incidents with their vehicles.
Yeah, exactly.
They could have easily just tried to sweep it under the rug, but instead they took responsibility and addressed those safety concerns head on.
It shows that they're committed to doing things the right way.
That's a valuable lesson for any business, really. Putting the customer first should always be the top priority, and it's crucial for long-term success.
I agree.
Okay, before we wrap up part 2, let's go back to Neuralink and their plans for brain-computer interfaces. They're trying to raise money at a $44 billion valuation, which means investors are taking them seriously. But what are the ethical implications of this technology? What we need to think about as it develops?
Neuralink is really pushing the limits of what's possible, and that's both exciting and a little scary. Imagine restoring movement for people who are paralyzed, allowing communication for people with locked-in syndrome, or even boosting our cognitive abilities. The potential benefits are huge, but like with any powerful technology, we need to be careful and have open conversations about the ethical implications.
So it's not just about whether we can do it, but whether we should do it.
Exactly. We need to think about things like data privacy, security, accessibility, and the potential for misuse. We need to make sure this technology is developed and used responsibly and ethically so that it benefits everyone, not just a select few.
It's a shared responsibility, and it's important to remember that it's not just about what's technologically possible, but also what's ethically right and what's best for society.
I completely agree.
And we're back for the final part of our deep dive. We've covered a lot of ground, haven't we? From the impact of tariffs to the potential of quantum computing and the ethical considerations surrounding AI and brain-computer interfaces. It's been quite a journey.
It really has. And now, as we wrap up our exploration, I think it's time to step back and think about what all of this means for the future.
Okay, so if we had to sum up everything we've talked about, what would be the one big takeaway? What's the common thread that connects all of these seemingly different stories?
I think the main theme is disruption and transformation. Technology is advancing so rapidly, and this constant innovation is changing everything about our lives, from how we work to how we interact with the world.
And it's not just the speed of these advancements, it's so remarkable. It's how interconnected they all are. The rise of AI, quantum computing, cryptocurrencies. It's all happening at once, and it's all connected.
Exactly. And that interconnectedness is crucial if you want to understand what's really going on. For example, the development of quantum computing could lead to entirely new levels of AI capabilities, pushing the boundaries of what we thought was possible.
It's like a chain reaction where one advancement leads to another and another, causing exponential growth and change in every industry you can think of. But with all this excitement about technology, we can't forget that all of this is happening in a world with a lot of geopolitical uncertainty and economic volatility.
That's a really important point. Those proposed tariffs from the former president, they show just how complicated things can get for businesses in a globalized world. And these challenges are only going to get tougher as we move forward.
So what does all of this mean for our listener? How can we as individuals prepare for a future that's being shaped by these powerful and often unpredictable forces?
Well, I think adaptability and a commitment to lifelong learning are key. The skills that are in high demand today might be obsolete tomorrow, so it's important to be curious and willing to learn new things and adapt as the world changes around us.
That makes sense. It's not just about learning specific things. It's about developing the ability to learn and unlearn and relearn throughout our lives. But beyond adaptability, what other advice can we give our listeners as they navigate this complex and ever-changing landscape?
I think it's crucial to really think about how these technological advancements could impact your own life, both personally and professionally. For example, if you're in a field that could be disrupted by automation or AI, what can you do to prepare for the future?
That's a great point. It's about being aware of the trends and taking steps to position yourself to thrive in a world that's becoming increasingly driven by technology. And for those who are interested in investing in emerging technologies like cryptocurrencies, what are some key things they should consider?
As we talked about earlier, any investment should be made with a well-informed perspective. Do your research, understand the risks, and make sure your investments align with your financial goals and how much risk you're comfortable with. The crypto market is known for being volatile, so be prepared for some ups and downs.
Good advice. And beyond the practical considerations, it's also important to think about the ethical implications of these new technologies.
Absolutely. We need to make sure that these advancements are used for good and that they don't make existing inequalities worse. This requires everyone to work together: governments, industry leaders, researchers, and everyday citizens.
It's a shared responsibility, and it highlights how important it is to not just focus on what's technologically possible, but also what's ethically right and what's best for society as a whole. So, as we wrap up this deep dive, what final thought would you like to leave our listeners with?
The future isn't something that just happens to us. It's something we create through our choices, our actions, and our collective will. Let's work together to create a future that benefits all of humanity, a future where technological progress is guided by ethical considerations and a commitment to a more just and equitable world.
That's a powerful and inspiring message. Thanks for joining us on this deep dive into the world of tech and tariffs in 2025. We hope you found it informative, thought-provoking, and empowering. Remember, the future is what we make it, so let's make it a future worth striving for.